On the day of my sweet 16 party, I didn't receive Kaelan, whom I had longed for, but instead, a royal decree of alliance. A decree that would send me far away to another country, to become a bride in place of my eldest sister. It was Kaelan who, with military merit earned by nearly losing his life, had knelt before the king, begging for it, step by step. Only then did I realize that Kaelan had always loved my eldest sister, and approaching me was out of necessity. So, I calmly embarked on the path of alliance marriage. Before departing, I gave Kaelan a graceful bow, my eyes reflecting the boundless expanse of snow. May little General Kaelan's career soar, and may we never meet again. Then, with the vast snowy landscape behind me and Kaelan's eyes suddenly reddened, I walked forward slowly but resolutely, never once looking back. Inside the main hall, there was a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes fell on me, full of pity, regret, and reluctance, piercing me like 1,000 swords. Changlu County Evangeline received the decree. The palace servant standing before me spoke slowly, presenting the bright yellow decree to me. I was stunned for a moment, then obediently lowered my neck, bowed down, and slowly knelt, reaching out to receive the silk cloth that held my future. The hairpin on my head hit the ground with a crisp sound as I bowed. Your humble servant thanks the Emperor. Kneeling on the ground, I opened my eyes wide, watching large tears fall and disappear into the floor. My wrist was gently held and lifted, the palace servant's tone tinged with regret. The wedding is set for next month. County Princess, please prepare yourself. After saying that, he turned and led the large entourage of palace servants out. As soon as the palace servants left the estate, Mom collapsed to the ground, her face pale, weeping softly in Dad's arms. Dad's expression remained unchanged, forcing himself to see off the relatives and friends who had come to attend my sweet 16 party. Then, he suddenly turned around, took my hand, and said urgently, Evangeline, pack your belongings now and go somewhere where no one knows you. Mom and Dad will hold them off here for you. He choked up before he could finish, turning his head to wipe the tears from his eyes with his sleeve. I reached out, grasped Dad's trembling hand, then pulled him to Mom's side, put my arm around her, rested my head on her shoulder, and gently comforted them. Mom, Dad, don't worry about Evangeline. This time, I'm going for alliance marriage. Behind me is all of Westland. No one in Northwood would dare to harm me. Mom's voice choked, her eyes red and swollen as she stared at me, her eyes full of sadness. But, it shouldn't be you. Yes, this royal decree shouldn't be mine. The person chosen for the alliance marriage had never been me, but my eldest sister, Ariel Jiang, the Jiang family's eldest daughter. If Kaelan hadn't knelt before the king, begging for this decree with military merit earned by nearly losing his life, the person delivering the decree today should have gone to Duke Jiang's estate next door, not to our Jiang family's distant relative's mansion. Everyone praised little General Kaelan's deep affection, using his life's glory and the military merit he had earned to seek this decree, to prevent his beloved Ariel Jiang, the Jiang family's eldest daughter, from marrying far away to Northwood. What moving feelings! If I hadn't secretly pledged my life to Kaelan, I might have been moved by this romance novel-like, touching love story. I blinked my dry eyes, looked at my parents, who were secretly saddened, pinched the palm of my hand hard, and controlled my emotions. Dad, Mom, I've been sheltered by you for over 10 years, that's enough. Mom, don't be sad. With little brother by your side in the future, your daughter can rest assured. After saying these words, I smiled at Mom, touched her belly, my eyes filled with tenderness. After comforting Mom and Dad for a long time, I finally persuaded them and helped them back to their room. The Emperor bestowed marriage decree meant that if I dared to disobey, the crime would be punished the 9 generations. I couldn't let my parents and the younger brother still in the womb be buried with me for my own life. This marriage, I had to go through with it. Looking at the jade bracelet Kaelan had given me on my wrist, I laughed mockingly. Kaelan, you really know how to grasp my weakness, forcing me to agree. Lying on the low couch, I stared at the tassels hanging from the side of the bed, unable to fall asleep. As soon as I closed my eyes, many scenes kept flashing in my mind. the palace servant delivering the decree, the pitying and regretful eyes of the surrounding relatives and friends, the sad and tearful expressions of my parents, and Kaelan, the young man secretly climbing over the wall and sitting on the wall to play that ocarina melody, the lotus flowers quietly placed on my window, the burning love in his eyes when he looked at me during the lantern festival, and the high-spirited young man sitting on horseback before the expedition, his sleeves fluttering, his eyes filled with shattered light. The young man who secretly climbed over the wall to my window before the expedition, holding a large bunch of bright red lotus flowers, his eyes burning, looking up at me and promising. He said to wait for him. He said he would return triumphantly before my Sweet 16 party, and he would give me a unique Sweet 16 gift. He said that he would come and propose to me in person at that time. I seemed to be burned by the scorching gaze behind the lace curtain, hastily avoiding his eyes. I only dared to hide behind the lace curtain, my face completely red, too ashamed to speak for a long time. Only before the young man turned to leave, I whispered a soft okay in a voice that could barely be heard. I knew Kaelan heard it, heard my answer. Okay. Kaelan, I'll wait for your triumphant return. Wait for you to marry me. That was the first time I disregarded etiquette, forgetting all the teachings I had learned since childhood, and privately agreed to this promise that couldn't even be considered an agreement. Since that night, I had never seen Kaelan again. But every few days, I would receive letters from him, writing about what had happened to him these days, sometimes mixed with small items. Sometimes it was a beautiful bouquet of flowers he saw on the march, sometimes it was some rare trinkets from the frontier, sometimes it was some beautiful hairpins and ornaments, but without exception, every letter ended with the same sentence. Though separated by miles, my thoughts remain unbroken. These few words were filled with sincere love. Looking at these objects and letters, I carefully collected them in a box, my heart as if soaked in soft honey, every strand exuding sweetness. So, I waited day after day, relying on these letters and sweets, waiting for my little general to come and marry me on the day of my Sweet 16. But on the day of my Sweet 16, I didn't wait for my little general, but instead, a royal decree of alliance that he had personally requested. How ridiculous! I wore gorgeous clothes and was full of joy for this day, but what I got was this result. I didn't even dare to shed tears, and had to force a smile and pretend to be full of joy to receive the decree. What reason did I have to cry? My relationship with Kaelan had always been a promise he made casually, and no marriage had ever been arranged. What reason did I have to refuse? That was a marriage bestowed by the emperor. I couldn't control my emotions any longer, letting large tears roll down from the corners of my eyes, soaking the pillow. After the royal decree was announced, gifts from the emperor began to pile up at the mansion like a stream. Everyone said that the emperor was benevolent, valued the Jiang family daughter, and the Jiang estate was blessed, suddenly becoming related to royalty from an insignificant Jiang family branch. Everyone only saw the festive and grand appearance of this marriage, but no one ever asked me if I was willing. Although my parents were worried, they had no choice but to accept these things. I kept comforting them, letting them place their hopes on my unborn younger brother, and not worry too much about my affairs. After I had persuaded them many times, my parents listened a little and were no longer as sad as before. I knew this was the best plan. This time, I was going to alliance marriage. The journey was fraught with difficulties, and the war between Westland and Northwood had been constant in previous years. Although it was called alliance marriage, it was essentially being held as a hostage. Everyone knew that I was a tribute sent to Northwood. Maybe I would lose my life on the way before even entering Northwood's territory. Not only could I not serve my parents, but I couldn't even repay them for their years of nurturing, but instead, I was making them worry and trouble me for nothing. Fortunately, there was still my younger brother. If I died, my parents would have something to live for. Evangeline, the wedding gown is here, try it on. Hearing this, I turned around and saw Mom standing behind me, staring at me fixedly, and sighing. Looking at the wedding gown in Mom's hands, I was lost for a moment, then got up, grabbed Mom's wrist, pressed her into the chair, reached out and smoothed her furrowed brow. Mom, I'll go put it on for you to see. I smiled at Mom, and after saying that, I took the wedding gown and entered the inner room. Looking at the shimmering wedding gown on the bed and the phoenix coronet and ceremonial robes on the table next to it, my eyes were indifferent. The wedding gown was made according to the county princess ceremony. I had never seen such good material before, and I never dared to hope that I would wear it one day. But things are unpredictable. Who would have thought that the first time I wore it would be a wedding gown? Was this a kind of luck? I laughed mockingly, put on the wedding gown piece by piece, and slowly walked out. The first time Mom saw me, tears couldn't stop falling. Then, she hurriedly wiped the tears from her cheeks, got up, pulled me to the bronze mirror, picked up the comb next to it, and began to comb my hair. My Evangeline is the most beautiful bride Mom has ever seen. Looking at the woman reflected in the mirror, the shimmering wedding gown reflected a charming face, but there was no joy of waiting to be married. Her face was indifferent and calm. Evangeline, not being able to protect you, Mom and Dad are sorry. I turned around without saying anything, rested my face in Mom's arms, and rubbed against her like a spoiled child. Mom didn't speak anymore, just sighed deeply, brushed the broken hair from my face behind my ears, whispered I'm sorry, and then didn't dare to look at me again, turning her head and walking out quickly. After Mom's clothes completely disappeared outside the house, I dared to put down the corners of my mouth that were smiling a little stiffly, covered my face, and cried silently. Suddenly hearing footsteps behind me, I thought it was Mom who had turned back, hurriedly wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes with my sleeve, put a smile back on my face, and turned around to explain to Mom. Mom, I accidentally bumped my wrist just now. I cried because it hurt. When I turned around and saw the person in front of me, the smile on the corner of my mouth froze, and the wrist I stretched out also stopped in midair. My voice trembled a little, and I couldn't help but utter two words. Kaelan. It was Kaelan, whom I hadn't been able to see since that night half a year ago. All the blood in my body seemed to be frozen. Looking at this familiar face, my eyes suddenly turned red, and I clenched my fists hard to control the ups and downs in my heart. The person in front of me was wearing a dark black outfit, his black hair tied high, fluttering in the wind, holding a long sword in his hand, dressed as usual, but he couldn't hide the murderous aura. Kaelan and I stared at each other from a distance of a few feet, neither of us speaking. It wasn't until I heard the sound of servants walking outside the courtyard that I suddenly reacted, and my expression cooled down, my tone tinged with unconcealable grievances. I wonder why little General Kaelan has come late at night. Hearing my words, Kaelan's figure outside the courtyard seemed to tremble for a moment, then he slowly took a step towards me. I couldn't help but take a few steps back, grabbing the silk cloth dress defensively with both hands, my eyes full of vigilance. Kaelan's approaching footsteps stopped, his expression a little stunned, as if he didn't expect me to react like this. Then, Kaelan's expression changed, and he suddenly laughed, his tone as unrestrained and wanton as before, but the words he uttered pierced my heart like sharp swords, leaving it covered in blood. Evangeline Jiang, obediently become a bride in place of your eldest sister, don't think about escaping. Hearing these words, my breath stagnated, my dark eyes stared at him without blinking, my voice light and floating, tinged with trembling. Kaelan, why me? Why do this to me? A trace of struggle flashed across Kaelan's eyes, then quickly disappeared. He raised his head, looked at me, his voice without any warmth, his tone tinged with casual malice. Because your last name is Jiang, the person chosen for the alliance marriage must be you. Besides, Ariel is weak and spoiled, she shouldn't go there. Ariel? So everything was for my eldest sister? Those words, those letters, those gifts and flowers, all of it was a play to get me to become a bride in place of my eldest sister? The bitterness coming from my nose ran straight to my eyes filled with tears. I blinked a few times, desperately holding back the bitterness and grievances in my heart, so hard that my throat was trembling. Kaelan, so all along, you've been lying to me? Kaelan's expression stiffened for a moment, then he took a step back, his expression hidden in the darkness, and he couldn't see clearly. He asked me back in a teasing tone. Don't tell me, you're serious, Miss Jiang? It's just for fun. The blood drained from my face. The moment I heard these words, my whole body seemed to be drenched in ice water from head to toe. I couldn't help but laugh foolishly. Just for fun. What a great just for fun. It turned out that from beginning to end, I was the only one who was acting. Those sleepless nights and days of joy and anticipation were all my solo performance. Seeing me so stupid and so easy to deceive, Kaelan must have mocked me countless times in his heart. Evangeline Jiang, How stupid. Seeing my expression, Kaelan frowned impatiently, clicked his tongue twice, then seemed to think of something, and threatened me with red eyes. Evangeline Jiang, if you hate me, live well, don't think about seeking death, otherwise the Jiang estate. General Kaelan, rest assured. I interrupted Kaelan's words, then turned around, took a box from the house, and threw it at Kaelan's feet. The box rolled on the ground, and the things inside scattered, covering the ground. A full box, all the letters and objects that Kaelan had sent me over the years, dried flowers, hairpins, and various trinkets scattered all over the ground, like my already dilapidated heart. These things are returned to their owner. As a woman waiting to be married, General Kaelan, please don't come here again in the future. After saying these words, I didn't want to look at Kaelan again, turned around and was about to leave, but when I was about to enter the door, I suddenly caught a glimpse of the jade bracelet on my wrist. My footsteps paused for a moment, then I turned around abruptly. Why, Kaelan was squatting on the ground, his eyes lowered, staring at the scattered objects on the ground with an unclear expression. Hearing my footsteps, he suddenly raised his head, his expression showing undisguised sadness, and a complex expression flashed across his eyes. I had no strength to understand what those emotions in Kaelan's eyes meant. My heart and eyes only wanted to get away. Get away from everything related to Kaelan. I slowly reached out, took off the jade bracelet on my hand, and threw it into Kaelan's arms. The jade bracelet rolled out of Kaelan's arms, hit the ground with a crisp sound, and then shattered into several pieces. I stared expressionlessly at Kaelan, who was squatting on the ground, his hands trembling as he reached for the broken pieces of the bracelet, and turned around and stepped into the house without looking back. The moment I closed the door and leaned against the doorframe, I slowly slid down and knelt on the ground, covering my lips tightly to prevent the sobs from my throat from escaping, and large tears fell down. I clenched my hands, my long nails digging into my flesh, but I couldn't feel any pain. The suffocating feeling of being played with and then abandoned was constantly engulfing me, making me unable to breathe. In the chaos of consciousness, there was only one very clear thought in my mind. I don't want to love Kaelan anymore. The next day, the outside of the courtyard was peaceful. The mess of last night had disappeared completely. If I hadn't seen the slightly swollen eyes in the mirror, I would have thought that Kaelan's appearance was all my imagination. When Mom saw my swollen eyes, she didn't say anything, just hugged me tightly in her arms. I buried my face in Mom's arms, closed my eyes, and rubbed against her. The days passed seemingly peacefully like this, and soon it was the night before the Alliance marriage. I opened my eyes, tossing and turning restlessly, so I got up, got out of bed, picked up a pen and paper, and wrote 3 prayer strips and walked outside. Standing under the pear tree, I closed my eyes, clenched my fists, and whispered a wish to the pear tree. Your humble servant has no other wishes, only 3. First, may my family be safe and healthy. Second, may everything go smoothly in the future. Third, may I never meet you again in this life. After saying these words, I reached out and put the prayer strips in the tree hole, bowed piously several times, and then stood up straight under the pear tree, looking around, wanting to engrave the small house where I had lived for more than 10 years in my mind. Suddenly, a dark shadow seemed to flash past the courtyard wall. I blinked and looked at it again, but only saw the shadow of the pear tree reflected on the courtyard wall by the moonlight. What are you thinking about? How could it be Kaelan? He had said those words so clearly that day. I laughed a little self-deprecatingly, shook my head secretly, gathered the slightly cool coat, and walked towards the house. I couldn't sleep all night. Before dawn, I was pulled up by the maid, cleansed my face, brushed my teeth, put on makeup, dressed, and styled my hair. When I sat in front of the mirror and looked at the woman in the red wedding gown, extremely bright, I seemed to realize that today was my wedding day. From today on, I will no longer be a Jiang family daughter, but a Mrs. Pei. This place will no longer be my home in the future. Thinking of this, my eyes were a little sore, and I closed my eyes tightly to hold back the tears in my eyes. May the new couple be blessed with harmony, beauty, and prosperity for generations to come. Along with the matchmaker's blessings, the bridal veil fell on my head. Only the dazzling red remained before my eyes. The deafening festive music surrounded my ears, and all around me was a festive atmosphere of laughter. I was helped out slowly stepping over the carpet covered with petals, walking towards the door. Just as I was about to step out of the door, I suddenly lifted the red veil, turned around, lifted my skirt, ran towards the house, knelt down in the hall, and kowtowed 3 times to my parents standing in the hall. Mom, Dad, your daughter is unfilial and has not been able to serve you, so I apologize. After saying these words, I buried my head on the ground, and tears could no longer be held back. Mom helped me up, reached out, and wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, sobbing and unable to speak, just holding me tightly and unwilling to let go. I forced a smile on the corner of my mouth, said goodbye to them in a trembling voice. I shouldn't cry, but the tears in the corners of my eyes couldn't be stopped. Mom, Dad, your daughter is leaving. After saying these words, I didn't dare to look at them again, quickly turned around and sat in the carriage. After the curtain of the carriage was completely lowered, my tears could no longer be suppressed, and fell straight down, soaking the wedding gown on my knees in just a few moments. This farewell is the last time. Although I had been prepared for it for a long time, when this day really came, the uncontrollable sadness in my heart seemed to pierce me, the pain even made my breath sour. The carriage stopped abruptly after walking a few steps. I hurriedly wiped the tears from my face, sat up straight, took a few deep breaths, recovered my emotions, and then asked calmly what had happened. As soon as the words fell, the curtain of the carriage was picked open by a sword. I looked up and met Kaelan's eyes standing in front of the carriage. Kaelan was wearing a bright red gown, his long hair that was usually half-tied was now completely tied up, with a jade hairpin. Whether it was because of the panic on the road or something else, there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead, and a few strands of hair hung down from his temples. Kaelan's fingers holding the carriage tensed up, and he looked at me quietly, his eyes with a sadness that I couldn't understand. My fingers tightly grasped the wedding gown on my body, my heart a little timid, but inevitably rippling with some secret joy and anticipation. Kaelan, do you regret it? Are you here to take me away? Is the sadness in your eyes because of me? I thought that when I saw Kaelan again, my heart should be full of resentment and anger, but when I was really about to leave completely, my heart was full of bitterness and humble anticipation. I don't want to leave here, I don't want to leave my parents, I don't want to leave this land that I am familiar with. I don't want to marry to another country, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with people I don't know. So, Kaelan, can you take me away? My eyes were full of begging as I looked at Kaelan, my heart felt like it was immersed in a frying pan, every second was torture. Kaelan didn't speak, just turned away from my gaze. The next moment, a delicate voice interjected. Kaelan, my favorite pastry is going to run out. Hurry up! Following the voice, I turned my head and saw a woman behind Kaelan, with bright eyes and a sweet smile, wearing a bright red dress that matched Kaelan's, and a few delicate crabapple flowers were pinned on her black bun, making her look indescribably delicate and lively. When her eyes swept over me, a trace of surprise flashed across her eyes, and then she smiled at me. She didn't recognize me, but I knew her. I would see her at the annual family banquet. The Jiang family's eldest daughter, Ariel Jiang, who was raised with love and affection, sat at the head of the table, while I was at the end. She was Ariel Jiang, the Jiang family's eldest daughter, the person Kaelan held in his heart. Kaelan's expression returned to gentleness, his eyebrows and eyes full of helplessness and doting. Although his tone was teasing, he couldn't hide the love in his words. It's my fault. Please wait a little longer, Mississippi. Kaelan, W. Ho had always been willful, let her complain and coaxed her nicely. After saying these words, Kaelan reached out and took out a silk cloth box from his sleeve, put it in the carriage, his expression indifferent, his tone tinged with urgency. This gift is given by Ariel to thank Miss Jiang for voluntarily marrying for alliance marriage. I hope Miss Jiang will accept it. After hearing her name, Ariel leaned out from behind him, bowed to me, her eyes full of undisguised innocence and gratitude. Cousin, thank you so much for this alliance marriage. I thought about it and still felt that I should thank you. Please accept the gift. My expression was a little stiff, and after being stunned for a long time, I forced a stiff smile. Kaelan really protected her very well, she didn't even know the truth of this alliance marriage. I couldn't help but laugh, laughing so hard that tears fell down. The anticipation and begging just now were like a loud slap in the face. Evangeline Jiang, you are really asking for trouble. I wiped the tears from my face with both hands, bowed gracefully to Kaelan, and smiled as I blessed him. May little General Kaelan's career soar, and may we never meet again. I stared into Kaelan's eyes, saying these words slowly and firmly, word by word, and then lowered the curtain to block Kaelan's sight. From now on, don't meet again. After a long and arduous journey, the wedding procession entered the border of Northwood 3 days later. I picked up the curtain, and what I saw at a glance was the snowy sky. It will be there in half an hour, Mrs. Don't worry. The follower on the road saw me picking up the curtain and looking around, thinking that I was anxious, so he spoke to comfort me. Hearing these words, I felt a little warmth in my heart and smiled at him. Half an hour later, will I meet my future husband? I felt a little nervous for no reason, and then smiled self-deprecatingly when I realized it. I'm afraid that being able to meet a normal husband would be great luck. After all, I was the one who was abandoned by Westland to marry for alliance marriage. While thinking wildly, the convoy had unknowingly stopped. Mrs., please come down. Hearing a clear and moist voice coming from outside the carriage, I quickly put the red veil placed on the side on my head, and felt a little nervous involuntarily. Then, a pair of distinct, slender, and fair hands reached out to me. Looking at the hand before me, I paused for a few seconds, and then slowly placed my own in his. My palm was held firmly, and the person before me led me forward. The red veil obscured my vision, allowing me to only see blurred outlines of people through the shifting light and shadows. Whether it was the crowd or the instinctive apprehension of an unfamiliar environment, I felt my hands tremble slightly. As if sensing my tremor, the person holding my hand stopped and turned to look at me intently. A chill ran through me. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for a scolding, but instead, he simply squeezed my palm, his voice gentle and reassuring. Evangeline Jiang, there's no need to be nervous. This is your home now. Hearing this, I was taken aback. The apprehension I felt crossing thousands of miles dissipated slightly, replaced by a hint of warmth. He must be a very gentle man. I carefully squeezed his hand back and softly replied, Then, I walked with him slowly towards the front hall, covered in a scarlet carpet. The wedding ceremony was long and intricate. Because I hadn't rested properly in recent days due to the long journey, I felt drowsy sitting on the bed in the bridal chamber, my face covered by the red veil. A burst of noise came from outside, and I suddenly opened my eyes, startled, and sat up straight. Then, with a bang, the door was thrown open. Second brother, hurry up and lift the veil so we can see sister-in-law. Hearing the young man's blunt words, I felt a blush creep up my face under the red veil, and my fingers clenched the wedding gown on my lap involuntarily. Zhao Wei is young and impetuous. I hope you won't be offended, Mrs. Pei. A clear, gentle voice, tinged with laughter and a hint of helplessness, followed. Hearing the words Mrs. Pei, the heat on my face intensified. My fingertips gripping my dress turned white, but I remained silent, quietly sitting on the bed under the red veil. Footsteps approached, and a pair of red boots appeared in my blurred vision beneath the veil. A jade scale was slipped under the veil, and then the red was gone. I looked up and met a pair of smiling eyes. A tall, handsome gentleman with refined features, wearing a scarlet wedding gown that matched mine, stood before me, his eyes filled with a gentle, warm gaze. It wasn't until his smile deepened that I realized I had been staring at him, captivated. Heat rushed up my neck, and I turned my face away, embarrassed. Second sister-in-law is so beautiful, like an angel. Second brother married an angel. The boy, half-grown, stared at me intently and blurted out the sentence. I smiled gently at him, and he ran out of the room, his face flushed. Suddenly, it was just me and my husband in the room. I turned my head to look at the floor, the earrings making my ears feel slightly hot. Mrs. Pei, I am your husband, Louis Pei. Hearing this, I trembled slightly. My fingers, resting at my side, moved almost imperceptibly. I opened my mouth to say something, but facing Louis Pei, the husband I had only just met, I felt tongue-tied. Louis Pei seemed to sense my embarrassment and unease. He bent down slightly to meet my gaze, a warm smile playing on his lips. This will be your home from now on, Evangeline Jiang. Hearing this, my eyes welled up. The tumultuous emotions of the past few days gradually subsided, replaced by a sense of peace. This would be my home from now on. This person would be the one I would spend the rest of my life with, sharing both joys and sorrow. Rose. Looking at Louis Pay, who was gazing at me tenderly, my eyes curved into a smile, a genuine smile. Luckily, I had found a good husband. The days ahead would be stable and happy, I hoped. Would be happy. I sat on a low couch and reached out to catch a snowflake drifting in through the window. Looking at the white expanse of snow outside and the snowflake resting on my fingertip, my thoughts drifted away. It felt like only yesterday that I first came to Northwood. Time had flown by. I sighed inwardly. As I felt the coldness on my fingertip, I was about to pull my hand back when suddenly, my waist tightened, and a warm body pressed against my back. I gasped involuntarily, but relaxed when I smelled the familiar scent of bamboo behind me, finding a comfortable position leaning against the person's chest. The window is drafty. You're not strong. Don't stay there too long. Hearing Louis Pay's helpless tone, I suddenly felt like teasing him. I turned my head, pouting, and looked at him with feigned grievance. Louis Pay, you're scolding me. It was my fault. I'm at your disposal, my dear. Louis Pay looked helpless, tucked my cold fingers into his chest, and bent down to apologize, his lowered eyebrows hiding nothing but doting love. I couldn't help but smile, raising my chin playfully. My eyes glanced inadvertently at the bronze mirror on the low table and I froze. In the mirror was a woman whose face was filled with playfulness, uninhibited laughter, and the obvious signs of being cherished and loved. Was that me? I couldn't believe it. Only a year ago, I was filled with death, with sadness in my eyes that I couldn't hide. And now, in such a short time, I had become like this, full of life and vitality. Seeing me dazed, Louis Pay asked gently what was wrong. It just feels so magical. The way I am now is something I wouldn't have dared to imagine a year ago. I looked back on the things that seemed like a lifetime ago. Louis Pay cupped my face in his hands, his eyes filled with determination. Evangeline Jiang, you deserve to be happy. It was him who was blind. Hearing Louis Pay's words, the corners of my lips curved up involuntarily. I leaned into Louis Pay's embrace, reached out and intertwined my fingers with his, my voice filled with gratitude. I'm so glad I met you. I was so glad I met you, Louis Pay. From the moment I left home, my soul was falling. Abandoned by Kaelan, my sincerity trampled on, I wandered like a soulless being. Where in this vast world was my home? Nowhere to belong. You lifted me up when I was broken, piecing me back together with tenderness and love. You said this would be my home from now on. From the gentle treatment at our first meeting to the love and care that followed, I thought that after Kaelan, I would never believe in love again. But when your fiery love enveloped me, I couldn't help but want to get closer. I realized that it wasn't that I didn't believe in love, but that I was afraid of it. I was afraid of being lifted up by this ephemeral love, only to be dropped heavily again. That kind of feeling was too painful. But being loved really did bring back flesh and blood. Being loved may really be a magical thing. Looking at Louis Pay, who was staring at me, warmth filled my heart. A year ago, I asked myself if I would be happy. Now I can confidently tell my past self, I am happy now. I thought that life would continue peacefully and happily, but I never expected to see Kaelan again. When I saw Kaelan standing in the front hall, the smile froze on my face. My expression instantly turned cold, and I frowned, looking at Kaelan warily. Kaelan's eyes were fixed on me, his eyes filled with dark, turbulent emotions, his expression showing both wariness and expectation. Evangeline Jiang, I've come to take you home. Hearing this, I frowned slightly, strands of annoyance appearing on my face. My eyes showed undisguised ridicule and confusion. General Kaelan, are you out of your mind? This is my home now. And please, call me Mrs. Pay. Kaelan's face turned pale when he heard this. His gaze fixed on my face, his eyes red with grief and filled with a thick, unresolved sorrow. I couldn't figure out who Kaelan was putting on this show for, and my eyes were filled with annoyance. General Kaelan, who are you putting on this act for? No, Evangeline Jiang, let me explain. Kaelan looked up suddenly, his eyes filled with pain, his voice hoarse and dry. I sincerely wanted to marry you before I left. But later, in the army, I discovered that the deaths of my father and brothers were due to a conspiracy. The Kaelan army, 3,000 lives weighed heavily on me, and I had to avenge them. The interests and dangers involved were far beyond my imagination. From the moment I started investigating, I couldn't extricate myself. I didn't care about my own life anymore, but I couldn't not care about your safety. The forces behind this are too great. If they find out about you... Kaelan paused at this point, as if afraid to think about it, and closed his eyes in pain. I knew that if I told you everything, you wouldn't abandon me, but I couldn't risk your life. The only way to protect you was to make you think I had changed my mind so you would be willing to leave and stay away from the danger. So I conspired with Ariel Jiang. She and your elder brother had been in love for years, waiting to get engaged after your brother's victorious return. She only agreed to help me create a scenario where the world would believe I was in love with her, and then I begged the emperor for the royal decree to send you away. This was the safest way I could think of. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but Evangeline Jiang, everything I said before, everything I wrote in those letters, every word was my true heart. So, come back to Westland with me, please? Kaelan's last words were filled with pleading, his eyes red as he looked at me, his eyes filled with love that could no longer be concealed. My fingertips trembled, and a feeling of helplessness washed over me. If that was the reason, then what was my suffering worth? Looking at Kaelan on the ground, his eyes filled with pleading, I was silent for a moment, then sighed, my voice distant and thin. Kaelan, I won't forgive you. Kaelan looked up suddenly, shaking his head, the corners of his eyes drooping, a red hue, the light in his dark eyes sparse and broken. I didn't give Kaelan a chance to speak, and told him the reason in a calm voice. Kaelan, do you know how I felt back then? At my sweet 16 party, I was filled with joy, waiting for my little general to come only to receive the royal decree of alliance that he had personally requested. I couldn't believe it, I didn't want to believe it. He had said he wanted to marry me just a few days before. I couldn't sleep night after night, and I only dared to cry in places where no one could see me. Later, I saw you, and I thought that as long as you explained, I would believe you, but you told me it was all an act. Kaelan, I didn't know your hardships back then. All I knew was that my sincerity had been trampled on, and all I felt was boundless despair and pain. Whether you did it for my own good or not, I felt those hurts deeply. Just because you have some hardships now, doesn't mean those sleepless, painful, and sad nights and days will disappear. Kaelan, I respect your decision, and I understand your desire for revenge, but all of that is in the past. I'm moving forward, and you should do the same. Kaelan was stunned for a moment after hearing my words, his face pale. Something shattered in his eyes, silently. I looked at him calmly, feeling a sense of relief and heartache for no reason. Reality is a sharp reef that cuts people and leaves them covered in wounds. Kaelan was silent for a long time, and when he spoke again, he was calm. Is he good tea? Oh, you? He loves me very much, and I love him too. After hearing my answer, Kaelan paused for a moment and then smiled, his expression back to normal, but his eyes were still filled with sadness. That's good then. It's good to be happy. Kaelan breathed a sigh of relief, muttering to himself, then got up, looked at me deeply, and walked out with a hunched back. In the dim twilight, his figure was tall and lonely, like a stray dog that couldn't find its home. I looked at him calmly, watching him walk away step by step, my heart as calm as dead water. Evangeline Jiang, who was that man? Louis Pei brushed past Kaelan, walking towards me in the twilight. He reached out and took my cold hand into his arms, warming it, his voice filled with curiosity. Looking at Louis Pei, whose eyes were filled with tenderness, I smiled and shook my head at him, my voice clear and firm. I don't know. He must have gone to the wrong place. Louis Pei didn't seem to notice anything amiss, and gently helped me inside, asking me what I wanted to eat today. I was filled with happiness, and listed a long list of dishes, then reached out and held Louis Pei's hand tightly. I didn't look back, and strode forward. I thought I had finally grasped happiness firmly. The end.